والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين. أما بعد, respected dignitaries on the dais, Janab Ziaullah Khan Sahab, Janab Riyaz Rom Sahab, Sheikh Harun Sahab, Munawar Hayat Sahab, and all the distinguished guests here of the dais, brothers, sisters, and children. It is indeed a happy occasion for us to be inviting you for this occasion where we are trying to present and learn from the teachings of this great and noble soul, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it so happens that this function is being held in the premises of this mosque, this well-known mosque in this locality, Masjid Husnain. So it's doubly important, and I appreciate the good nature and the large-heartedness of all our brothers here, that they have taken time out to visit the mosque also and to partake in the function here. This spirit of togetherness and brotherliness and the spirituality that we possess as Indians is indeed very important. And this mutual respect and affection and eagerness to know about each other is very important in this country. Ours is a plural society. India is a multi-religious, multicultural country. And in such a society, it is important for all of us to recognize who we are. And whilst we know our own religion, it is also important to know who our neighbor is. And it is such a wonderful atmosphere here that we have people of different faiths, people speaking different languages, and people, in spite of all these differences, we are here to learn a few things about the Prophet's life and know what mosque is all about. I highly appreciate this sentiment of our brothers here. And this is the tradition that we need to safeguard, nurture, and preserve, of mutual coming together and caring for each other and knowing each other. Secondly, we have come here to the mosque, maybe most of you for the first time, and unfortunately we are living in a time where there is so much of propaganda and misinformation, and today we know what media is all about. Media is no longer the custodian of truth. It spews stories and false propaganda and web of lies, and it's fake news and paid news. We know what the real face of media is. And there are people in the society who try to spread misunderstandings, and for the narrow gains, electoral gains, political purposes, and for the selfish goals, they try to create misunderstandings between people. And this polarization, this hatred, this differences and distances that are being created amongst people is something which, again, is it doesn't augur well for the good of this nation. We are a multi-religious society, and it is important that we maintain this cordiality and cooperation and respect and tolerance to each other. So this fear of unknown sometimes is always heavy on our minds, So we thought, I appreciate or I congratulate the office bearers of this mosque that they have decided to invite you people and show what a mosque really is. We carry a lot of apprehensions and misgivings. So here is an occasion where you can come and visit the mosque. You're welcome anytime, for that matter. Mosque is an open place for the worship of Creator. We have taken pains to invite you here and show you what mosque is all about. Um, Mosque is a place where Muslims gather for worshipping 5 times a day. We worship uh, before the dawn, just after noon time, 1 hour before the sunset, at the sunset, immediately after sunset, as you saw just now, and again within half an hour from now, that is about hour and a half after sunset. These are the 5 obligatory prayers that we observe prayers. And it's important that we all remember our Creator. That is what gives us the inner strength. We are human beings, and what differentiates us from the other creatures is our morality and the moral dimension that we have. So it is important as human beings that we should realize that we have been created by God, and it is our duty to obey Him, worship Him, and follow the dictates of religion in our life. So, salawat, our prayers, is one way of showing your obedience to Creator. We are lost in the hustle and bustle of life and in all our occupations and professions and in running around in the life. Every now and then, every after 3 hours, this azan, what we call us, is an invitation to the prayer. It is a reminder that this is the time for your prayer. Just about 15 minutes or half an hour before the actual prayer starts, the azan is given. Azan is a short reminder. And if you look at the words that are uttered, the words that are said in azan, it is not a prayer in itself. Sometimes people carry the misgiving that why do you have to say it on the loudspeaker, and why do you have to say it so loud? And it is rather a short reminder, and if you look at the meaning of the words that are used in azan, it talks about the greatness of our Creator. Allahu Akbar. It is not talking about the Akbar, Badshah Akbar, Emperor. And some people carry the misconception that they are singing praises of Akbar, the Emperor. No, it is the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, our Creator. It is His bounties and it is His favors that we are enjoying in our life. So we are reminded that He is the greatest. And then the declaration that the entire world is a creation and He is the Creator. And there is no God except that one single deity. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah is but to proclaim this declaration that He is the only Creator for the entire mankind. Then we also declare that Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of Allah for the entire mankind. So we proclaim that, we give a declaration that He is the Prophet of Allah. Then people are reminded that this is the time for prayer. Hayya ala salah, come for prayer, come for the path of success. And then it ends again by saying Allahu Akbar, which means Allah is greatest. And La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God except that one single Creator. So this is a short reminder, which is an invitation for prayer, and it reminds us. We tend to get lost in the activities and forget who we are and what our duty to our Creator is and what our real purpose in life is. So as a reminder, we are called, we assemble here and we assemble at an appointed time. Prayer is to be performed in congregation. Prayer should be done in an appointed time. So, at the exact time, we stand in a single row. It teaches us discipline to follow the Imam and to perform the various actions that we do in Salah. What is Salah? What is Namaz? It is what paying obeisance to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Understanding that you are in the presence of your Almighty Lord. Sometimes we stand with folded hands. Then we bow before Him. Then we prostrate and put our forehead on the ground. And in different ways we try to express and understand and realize the greatness of our Creator. And the verses that are commonly recited in the prayers is Surah Fatiha, the first chapter in Quran. Again, it's an excellent chapter, and that is something which forms part of every rakah. We pray, one rakah is one unit. And we pray 3 rakahs in the Maghrib prayer that we just finished. We pray 4 rakahs in the congregational prayer which comes immediately after this gathering, half an hour from now. So in each rakah, apart from other parts of the Quran that we read and that reminds us about our duties, we always read the Surah Fatiha at the beginning, the preface of the Quran, which is what a wonderful prayer again, just like the Lord's Prayer and just like similar prayers that we have in other religions. This talks about Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All praise be to Allah, all thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the Lord of the worlds. So the first feeling that should come from us, the first response that we present when we are in prayer is to sing the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hamd, praise and thanks to our Creator. And again, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which means is most compassionate, most merciful. Every inch of our life, every moment of our life, we are indebted by the gratitudes, by the benevolence and the boons that we are enjoying in our life here. The air that we breathe, the sunlight that we enjoy, the water that we drink, the breeze that blows, and everything else here is but the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we realize, we say that He is the most compassionate, He is the most merciful. Then we say Maliki Yawmiddin, which means that He is the Lord of the Day of Judgment, He is the Master of the Day of Judgment. This life here is not going to end just like that. We have been given all the powers here, and we have been given all the freedom here to enjoy the entire universe and the boons that it has for us. But this is not just going to end like that. We are accountable, we are responsible, and the day of judgment is going to come, and we will return to our Lord to present our account and have our deeds examined and be rewarded or punished accordingly. Then we say, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You only we worship Allah, and from you only we seek help and sustenance. And then we seek guidance to the true path. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Oh God, guide us to the true path. The path of those on whom your blessings have showered, and not the path of those who have incurred your wrath or who have gone astray. So this is the prayer that forms the essence of Salah, essence of Kamal, and this is something which we recite in each prayer. It gives us an idea as to what we are and what our duties are. And Namaz is, Salah is an excellent form of equality between different people. It may be the peon at the door, but if he comes first, he will take the first row. It could be the governor, it could be the chief minister. If he comes a bit later, he will take a row behind him, and he will perform his prostration at the feet of the person in front of him. So there is absolute equality. There is no superiority or inferiority in between people based on their richness, on their color, or their positions they hold. Everybody is equal. Equality of mankind is something that we learn from prayer. Cleanliness. We can't just enter the mosque, we have to perform ablution. We wash our face, we wash our hands, we wash our feet. And after performing ablution, it is not just enough to have this spiritual purity in your heart. You should cleanse your body also to be able to perform. And also, prayer teaches us that you don't need any intermediary to reach your Lord. You don't have to depend on any person or any priest. Yes, we do have an imam who leads the prayers, but it is just an arrangement. Anybody amongst the congregation can lead the prayer. Anybody who is knowledgeable enough, who is old enough, is eligible to lead the prayer. There are many mosques where there are no appointed imams. People come there, amongst them whoever is the righteous person, the most pious person, he leads the prayer. And Quran says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَاعِيَ إِذَا دَعَانِ. if my servants ask you, O Prophet, tell them that I am very close to them. And if I am very close to them, as close as their jugular vein is. And I would answer every person's prayer. Every person can reach Lord and God directly. You don't need an intermediary. An intermediary is needing help from at every step of your life for performing a religious ritual is not the routine in Islam. Every person can directly beseech his Lord. Every person is equal and there is no hierarchy in Islam. Again, Salam offers us an opportunity to develop fraternity, bonding between different people. People coming from the locality know who is what, to know each other, to have social concern for each other, to practice charity. And we are proud to say that this mosque has a Baitul Mal, which caters to so many poor people in the community for their education, for their scholarship, for their health, and for their marriages, and so many other functions that are being performed from here. This is some aspects of the prayer that the mosque is all about. This is a clean place, this is an open place. There are just straight rows here. There is no idol here. There is no reservation here for anybody. Everybody is equal. Everybody comes and finds the place as and when he comes in. This is the equality which the Prophet has also preached. The verses that were recited in the beginning and which Riyaz also alluded to. Talk about this equality and the oneness of mankind. Unity of God is one. On the other hand, the other cardinal principle of the teaching of the Prophet is the unity of mankind. We are all from one single pair of Adam and Eve. We have no superiority or inferiority based on the race, or the color, or the language, or the land that we live in. We are all children of Adam. We are all brothers and sisters. It is important that this lesson should be learned and should be practiced. Unfortunately, much of the strife in the society today, in the world today, the wars that we see, is all because of this sense of racial and linguistic and other types of discrimination that we find in the world. The Prophet established a society, that society which had slavery and all sorts of tribal setup. He transformed it into one single brotherhood. And he declared on the final Hajj that he performed, the final pilgrimage he performed, he declared it that no Arab has any superiority over non-Arab. No non-Arab has a superiority over an Arab. No white is superior to black. No black is superior to white. We are all the children of Adam, and Adam was created from clay. So this is the equality that Islam preaches, and it is important that we should learn about this and practice it in our lives. The life of the Prophet is important because prophets are the real guides for humanity. For our physical needs, for our scientific needs, for the progress of civilization, man has enough resources at his command. But to live like a human being, in today's world, unfortunately, we have all luxuries at our disposal. But we have forgotten to live as human beings. Our moral dimension, our morality seems to be going down every day. And it is by turning to the prophets and their teachings that we can learn what nobility is, what morality is, and what are the values that we should practice. And Prophet Muhammad is the final prophet, the last prophet in the chain of prophets, which one of the traditions says there are 124,000 prophets. Prophets came to every part of the world, every language, every nook and corner. Even in our own country, there have been many prophets. Likulli qawmin had, for every qawm, for every nation there was a prophet. And likulli ajalin kitab, for every period of history there has been a book, a divine book. So this prophet is one who is universal. His appeal is universal. He is a prophet for all mankind. We have Rabbul Alameen, as Quran introduced. He is the Lord of the entire world. We have Rahmatul Alameen. This prophet is mercy unto the whole mankind. It is a pity that the teachings of this Prophet are not properly understood, and the mercy, the brotherhood that he not only preached but practiced is something that we need to revisit and learn today. He said the whole mankind is Allah. The entire creation is but the family of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best amongst you is the one who is good to the creation of Allah. He said, one of the traditions of the Prophet says, La yarhamullah, Allah yarhamullah. Allah would not have mercy on that person who is not kind to the people. And you would see that, I will just quote two examples from the life of this Prophet to show how compassionate he was, how considerate he was, how merciful he was. One occasion was when he visited Taif. He spent 13 years of his prophetic life in Makkah, and then he went to Medina and spent 10 years there. Then in Makkah, where he preached, he had very few followers, a few hundreds at the end of 13 years. In the 10th year of his prophetic life in Makkah, when he was disappointed by the poor response that he was getting, the discrimination, the persecution, and the slandering, and the difficulties that he had to encounter. This was the year he lost his wife, his dear wife, and he lost his uncle who was his guardian in Makkah. At that time he decides, looking at the poor response in Makkah, that he would go to Taif and invite them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then he goes there, he meets the chiefs there, they cold shoulder him, they do not give any warm response to him. They do not even fulfill the duty of being kind to the guest. Rather, his invitation is refused point blank. And then as he's returning, the street urchins are let loose on him to throw stones at him. And it is said so much so that they kept throwing stones at his feet, at his body, that he became very weak and fell down on the ground. And blood collected in his shoes. This was the greatest prophet, and this is how the people had treated him. At that moment, at that emotional moment, the angel which takes care of the mountains is sent to the prophet with a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if the prophet so wished, the whole tribe of Taif would be crushed between the two mountains. But then here is the prophet. Look at his mercy and look at how benevolent he is, even in the critical time, even in the weakest moment of his life. He says, no, I don't want this calamity to come on these people. I don't want Allah's punishment on these people. Maybe the children of these people will understand what I am preaching, what I am standing up for. This is the example of the Prophet when he is at his weakest. And look at his example even when he is at the strongest. You know, he spends 13 years here and then he goes to Medina. And then eventually the tide is turned. The people of Quraysh, the chieftains, everybody waged continuous wars and they are defeated. And there comes a moment of conquest of Makkah when he is returning to Makkah with a large army. And the same people who were bloodthirsty, who had troubled him no end, who had waged wars on him even when he was away in Medina, they are at his mercy. And at that moment he says, La tasriba alaykum al-yawm. Today there is no revenge. I'm not here to take revenge on my brothers. You are free people. You can go and live a free life. This is the high character and nobility of this Prophet. And there is a need to understand and develop these nobler qualities in our life today. Prophet has said about the common things that we have to observe in our life, how we should be with our neighbors. Only if this teaching of the Prophet about what your duties to your neighbor are followed by us today. And when we speak of neighbor, there is no mention of him being a Muslim or a person of other faith. Every neighbor is your neighbor. The Prophet said, if your neighbor is not free from your mischief and is troubled by your mischief, the Prophet said not once, 3 times, that you're not a faithful person. You don't have any faith, you don't have any iman. He said and repeated 3 times, if you are causing grief and mischief and trouble to your neighbor, he said. And he was so mindful of the duties of the neighbors that he said that if you prepare any special dish of curry, make sure that you add some extra water to it so that you can share it with your neighbor. If you bring some fruits to your house, make sure that you don't throw the skin of the fruit outside after you eat. Maybe the neighbor is a poor person. Maybe his children, he can't afford the same thing for his children. And they would feel pain to see those skin of the fruit outside. So this is the compassion that the Prophet has taught. And the companions of the Prophet were, they feared that the Prophet would even make them party to the property. That was the amount of instruction and insistence on being good to the neighbor that the Prophet has given. Only if this simple principles about the Prophet, if we follow in our life. About compulsion in religion, there's a lot of talk about conversion these days, isn't it? The governments are coming up with anti-conversion laws and whatnot. What we talk about is the freedom that every person should have. Every individual is answerable to his Creator. It is his independent decisions that he takes for which he would be questioned. الَّذِي خَلْقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Quran says, you have been created and this life and death has been created here so that Allah wants to see who amongst you is the better person, who recognizes Him and who does worship to Him, who obeys Him, who does good deeds. This independence of every person is important. It should be protected. You're demeaning a person if you accuse him of being converted for the sake of worldly gains. Certainly there should be no force. Certainly there should be no forced conversions. There should be no lure or deception. But every person's independence should be respected. And this is something which the Constitution has guaranteed. The freedom to profess, the freedom to practice, the freedom to propagate, the freedom to adopt. It is not Muslims' problem. And why would anybody become a Muslim the way Muslims are treated today? Unfortunately, this is a passing case, however. Why would anybody want to become a Muslim unless he's really convinced about the truth? All we need is the freedom to think, freedom to practice what you think is right. To dialogue, to debate, to discuss, to think about is something which is fundamental right of every human being. And this is what we need to protect. Otherwise, Islam has made it very clear. La ikraha fi din, there is no compulsion in religion. If there was any compulsion, the Prophet, his own uncle, who was his guardian, was such a guardian for him. He was very keen that he should accept Islam, but he did not. And Quran admonished him, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You are not in a position to give guidance to whomever you wills. It is Allah's wish, whomever He wills. He thinks is the right person, the right seeker of truth, He would guide him. So the Prophet himself could not make his uncle believe in Islam. When Quran is talking very explicitly that there should be no compulsion in religion, who are we to compel people to? So we need to understand what the real situation is all about, and we need to develop the qualities of respecting and tolerating and cooperating with each other. Islam says very clearly, "La tasubbu alladhina yad'una min dunillah." Do not call names. Do not revile the deities which other people pray to. Very clear instructions. And again, there's so much talk about terrorism and whatnot in the world today. And the different hues and aspects of it. But the Quran is very explicit that every human life is precious. Man khatara nafsin bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ard faka'annama khatara an-nas jamiyya. If a person is killed not for murder, not for spreading mischief in the land, it is as if he has killed the entire humanity. And if you say one person, وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا, it is as if you have saved the entire humanity. So these are the teachings of Islam, and we need to. I would like to conclude by making a clarion call here that this rich tradition of our country of living together. This is a country which is like a rainbow of different colors. A flower, a vase of different flowers. Let us respect each person. Let us learn to cooperate with each other. Live with harmony, live with peace, live by understanding the rights of your neighbor. In today's world, when there is so much of selfishness and when there is so much of violence and prejudice that is spread in the society, there is a need to learn what the teachings of these great personalities are. Prophet being the last prophet, and his teachings are for our good fortune preserved in its crystal purity. Quran is unadulterated. The teachings of the Prophet in its entire detail is available to us today. And the life and the teachings of the Prophet throw light on all aspects in our life. The position that he has given to women, for example, the rights of women that are guaranteed is a glorious chapter. This Prophet is an emancipator of women. He is a guardian of slaves. He is an example in all aspects of life. As a father, as a son, as a husband, as a neighbor, his life is a perfect example for us. He's a great philosopher, he's a guide, he's a teacher, he's a seer, he's an administrator, he's a commander-in-chief, he's a judge. In every aspect of his life, he's an example for us. There is a need to learn from this beacon of morality, this benefactor of humanity that this Prophet is. Muslims, we need to learn ourselves. We have to look at this Prophet not as a personality who belongs to Muslims alone. He hasn't made that claim. And Quran doesn't introduce him as such. It says, Rahmatul lil Alameen, not Rahmatul lil Muslimeen. It says he's just like the sun and water and all the other luxuries are for everybody. Similarly, this Prophet is for all humanity. And there is a need to learn from his teaching, practice it. Muslims need to practice it. Unfortunately, there is a gulf between what Muslims are and what Islam and Quran really is. We should practice and present the true example of the teachings of this Prophet in our lives. And we also request our fellow brothers and sisters, fellow countrymen, that just because Muslims may be lacking in certain respect, you should not disregard the teachings of this great personality and this holy book. This is a common heritage for the entire mankind. And in a world which is so much rife with lack of peace and chaos and strife and wars and violence and whatnot, there is a need to understand what the true meaning of life is and what our real purpose of existence is and what the great teachings of the all noble souls, and more particularly this last prophet, Prophet Muhammad is. We need to understand that humanity is our first religion. The good people on all sides. There are good people in all communities. It is not the wickedness of the few. It is the silence of the good majority of people who are there amongst all religions, which is what is more tragic and worrisome. The good people on all sides should come together and join together in creating this environment of trust and harmony and friendship. We should stand up for justice. We should always stand up for the cause of justice, even if it is against our own kith and kin. Quran says, always stand up for justice. Even if it is against even if the truth goes against, you have to stand up for the sake of justice, the Quran has said. In this society where there is so much of evil, we are all like one nation, like one boat. There are certain people, few people in their short-sightedness having to reach the water sooner. They are trying to burn a hole in the bottom of this boat. If you allow them to do that, if you don't undertake our responsibility of enjoining the truth, forbidding the evil, holding the hand of the unjust, the calamity and the tragedy would strike the entire nation. وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةَ اللَّهِ تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنكُمْ خَاصَّةً. Fear that calamity, which will not be restricted only to those few people, but it will take the entire society in its way. So I thank our brothers and sisters who are assembled here on our invitation. We are indeed happy to receive you. We need to be more open. We need to interact with each other, and we need to build the bridges of humanity, the bridges of morality between us to make our lives meaningful, our country great, and